Okay. Go. We're having people join us now, which is great. So, okay, we've had a couple of people join us now, more coming in. So I'll give it a couple seconds, but while everyone's joining, welcome. Happy Friday. I learned it's public holiday in New Zealand for those in New Zealand. So if you're joining us on a holiday, thank you. Neri's joining us from Japan, so she's had to work around time zones as well. While the rest of people join, I'll do the introduction so that we can skip straight to the content because I want to keep these nice, short, snappy, and keep to the content so that we can get to more Q&A time at the end. So just as a quick means of introduction, my name is Felix, if you haven't seen me before. So I help run a company called MindMuse, and we help build a platform for psychosocial risk for SMEs to make it simpler, easy, and actually accessible, so that companies can actually provide the care they need while providing the compliance which is required. And joining us here, we have Niru, who's bringing, I think, a couple of decades of experience in the safety space
Too
and
long.
half a decade in the psychosocial space. And I
Yeah.
think it's been brilliant observing your journey to becoming such a thought leader in the psychosocial space as well. So
Oh,
it's
thank
always a
you.
pleasure doing these with you.
You're too kind.
Before, before I do get things pass it over, if you have any questions, feel free to message it in the chat directly to the host and panelists or everyone. I will then bring it up during the session, or we'll come back to it at the end. If we don't get back to it, we will get back to you for that question by email. You might get a more comprehensive response. And I think that's all. And this
Yeah.
session is being recorded. So just know that if you mention something and you don't want it mentioned in the recording, just mention it in your question as well. And I think that's all from me. And I'll pass it over to you now, Niru.
Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's a month late, but we're kicking off with our series. And I'm really excited about it because last year we did 4 sessions, I think, Felix, and we just kind of scratched the surface of psychosocial. But this year we're kind of going to run it like a course. So uh, every psychosocial webinar will be connected to the next one. So if you get through the entire process, by the end of the year, you'll have a full body of knowledge of what psychosocial risk management is about and how to do it, from end to end at your workplace. But the first one I really enjoy and I love to share is the story of Sarah, who is a new worker, and we'll talk about her a little bit more. But it is with the intent of weaving the story and the psychosocial risk as it shows up in her workplace. But before we head on to that, let's just have a quick look at what psychosocial risk is and why does it matter. So as per Safe Work Australia, it's the hazards that arise from management of work and the work that we do. And it's with respect to environment, our interactions with the people, and the environment of work. They amount to things like high pressure, long shifts, late night, customer aggression, unstable hours, low control, but also they aren't just psychological, they can be physical as well because they show up in the physical side of things. So psychosocial hazards are real only from the point of view that we can quantify them and manage them at the same time. We can uh, control them, or we can put measures in place to manage them. And we'll see that in this webinar as well. So, who's Sarah? Sarah is a 19-year-old casual waitress. She's a uni student. She starts off with 2 shifts a week and ends up doing doubles by the end of the week, I think. She does not really complain. She doesn't really refuse work. She needs the extra money. And 6 months later, one moment changes the outcome of her, you know, situation, and we'll follow her journey and we'll discover what happened and how she experiences psychosocial risk in this webinar. Okay, so on the first month, it's a fresh start. She has 10 hours a week and she's really excited about it. She doesn't really get any onboarding because it's just a waitressing job, and but it's fairly high demand, it's a lot of work on your feet, but she doesn't really have a lot of control on what she does and when she does it. Second month, she gets 25 hours a week, and this is really great because it means more money. But then she's also asked to train a new recruit, and there is certain amount of conflict as you have it in work, plus fatigue starting to set in because not only is she working 25 hours, but she's a student as well. When the third month happens, she has a late night shift and she has to walk to the bus station on her own. She's not provided a buddy or any sort of an understanding of how to get home safely. These concerns that she raises with the supervisors are dismissed, and they just basically say it's part of her job. And she's feeling a little bit isolated already, and she's feeling that her supervisor isn't really supporting her at this stage. So coming on to 3 months, everything's not so rosy as it initially was expected to be, but it kind of starts to get a little bit, the gloss starts to come off. So what are the early signs that we are seeing already? Now, you would think that, you know what, she's just doing a normal job. What is really happening? Is there any risk in this situation at all? Are we talking about, psychosocial safety? Well, already she's withdrawn from the team. That's her behavior. But on an emotional level, she's probably feeling a little bit more irritable, mood swings. And there is a rise in her absenteeism. It does lead to turnover in other situations. So she's probably wanting to take a day off here and there just because it's just too much fatigue-wise. The frequent mistakes that people start to make and the forgetfulness is on an emotional level shows up due to anxiety, tension, and shutdown. And it also leads to physical risk of near misses and informal complaints. Avoiding certain tasks and people happens because people are feeling hopeless. They feel they have no control on their job, and there's a bit of fatigue. And there is a drop in engagement and morale. So on the organizational level, you start seeing all these things coming up. But then you can sort of walk back and see, extrapolate what they might be feeling on an emotional level to what their behavior looks like as well. Arriving late, leaving early, it's usually when people are not feeling safe in the work environment. They may be tearful. They might have a panic sort of a situation on an emotional level. And if there is conflict in escalation or silence in the meetings, that's your organizational cue. And then the last one is change in tone of communication, usually shown by people who are feeling detached and numb. There is, on an organization level, it'll show up like high sick leave or presentism in cases when people turn up to work when they're still not well recovered from their illness. Okay, what's happening in the third and fourth month? Um, so the fourth month, she has her first incident, and it's a burn. She drops a tray and she's doing a double shift. The report that they write on the incident is it was an operator error, and there was no follow-up. So on one hand, there was no deep down investigation as to why the incident happened, and operator error was just to sort of close the case. On the fifth month, there is a little bit more withdrawal. She becomes quiet, anxious, and withdrawn. Um, she keeps working out of fear. She does need the money, but she does turn up to work when she's sick, because obviously being a casual, taking time off would mean losing out on the money. So what happens on the 6th month is actually which tips over everything. She's verbally abused by a customer. There is no intervention by management. She files a claim the next day, and it is not just a psychological injury, it is a system failure. Now, at this point, I'd like you to take a little bit of a pause and think about it. Like, what happened on the 6th month and the claim that went through didn't really need to happen if there were things that were done properly from the get-go with regards to psychological and psychosocial safety. And we'll pull this apart a little bit more, but first let's go to how these risks and hazards show up. Sorry, I think I've got a bit of one screen and I missed a slide which I wanted to show you. Okay, so What happens with hazards is when there's a high job demand and low support, there is a high risk of burnout. And when there are unclear roles and exposure to aggression from the customer, it leads to anxiety. It may not happen in all 100% of the cases, but it does show up in most cases. And especially where there is bullying and casual status, silence, withdrawal, and presentism shows up repeatedly. Okay. So what was it that the work could have done to facilitate uh, a better work environment? That's what we say. Okay, 6 months went by. What was that the work could have done? So the things that they experienced were chronic fatigue, unsafe shift, no support after injury, no debrief, no risk register or psychosocial controls document. So these were the things that were absent in that work situation. But the simple things that the organization could have done is shift fatigue, max out the hours on a shift and rest enforcement, force people to rest between shifts. And that way fatigue could have been managed. Customer aggression is excellently managed by escalation policies and visible signage. But the main one, I think, were the job design and the job clarity with job description, boundary setting, and the roster design, which is basically input based. So the bottom two that we're talking about are the ones that really get people comfortable because they know the extent of their reach and the expectation of the business of what they're expected to do. And often in casual situations, these are left out and people just sort of are brought onto the work situation and off they go. Okay. So what is it from a legal point of view? So psychosocial hazard is a workplace health and safety hazard under the 2011 legislation now, and 2023 regulation amendment clarifies that. Psychosocial hazards must be identified, controlled, and reviewed. So for any PCBU conducting business under the Australian law has to demonstrate now that they're managing psychosocial hazard. Um, and that is very easily and in a straightforward way done by creating a risk register, controlling and managing this. And you don't really need to create a separate safety system. It can be incorporated in the existing safety system and, can be managed from there in a pretty simple and straightforward way. Now, what is this crossover effect? This is the part I like a lot because psychosocial and physical injuries are closely related. So when you start having these conversations with your management and your executive, you can actually bring this into the conversation as well because what they find is about 46% or to 47% of physical injuries usually have a psychosocial or psychological root cause. So, for example, if there is mental overload, which leads to physical fatigue, it can lead to manual handling injuries. And there is a very close linkage between psychosocial risk and musculoskeletal disease or any injury relating to ergonomics. So, like shoulder pain, back pain, carpal tunnel injuries. All of these have a direct link to psychosocial stress. Hypervigilance from trauma, so people get distracted, and then you end up with slips, falls, and cuts. Sleep disruption is a big one because when people are stressed at work, they don't sleep well, and it leads to impaired judgment, which further leads to physical injuries or equipment mismanagement, etc. Stress is equal to cognitive overload, muscle tension, sleep loss. In fact, stress is one of the major causes of musculoskeletal injuries at work. Impaired judgment also leads to more manual handling injuries. And this is actually based on research that has happened over the years, past 20 years, I think, more recently. Okay, so what was the final incident with Sarah? So customer throws a receipt at Sarah, calls her stupid. She finishes a shift. Next morning, she doesn't show up. Later, she lodges a psychological injury claim, and the system breakdown is exposed. So, in effect, that particular business ends up spending around 23,000 in psychosocial injury claims. Then they have to spend more in recruiting somebody to replace Sarah plus all the lost time in between Sarah being on injury leave and them hiring a new person. So there is a visible disruption for business. Had Sarah been managed in a way that was appropriate from day one, all these costs, financial and others, would not have been experienced by the business. So as you can see, there is a clear link between business cost and better psychosocial risk management as well. So it's the reason I talk about, strategic benefit to the businesses is basically to demonstrate that we don't really have to do psychosocial risk management strictly from regulatory compliance point of view. It is also good business sense to manage psychosocial injuries. How are we doing with time, Felix? I don't want to go over again today.
You're doing great. I'd say maybe another 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, good. So, what do workers need to know? Now, you don't need to go and pull out the entire code of practice and understand it so you know your rights. Um, you just need to know that you have a right to a psychologically safe workplace. Fatigue, abuse, unfairness are hazards, and not complaints. So, what the understanding needs to shift from a complaint to a risk point of view. And speaking up for yourself will protect not only you, but others as well in the workplace. But while workers need to be aware of what they expect from a workplace, the majority of the work is actually in the leadership's ballpark, really. And I know leaders don't always like to hear this, but they have more agency and influence in the organization. As a result, they can do a lot more to manage psychosocial hazards better. So the first one is to control psychosocial hazards. You have to have a risk register, you have to have a risk assessment, and create a system which is within the safety management system, which allows for psychosocial hazards to be managed. Engagement with workers is really big. I think consultation is one of the top three requirements in the workplace health and safety legislation as well. But it is also the way to go forward to manage this as well. And when people do get silent, it's a good time for the leaders to sit up and ask, why is everybody silent? What indicators were lost or not seen by the leaders when they were there as well? So leaders got a bit of more work to do. Now, what is a psychosocial system? Now, I've been talking about risk registers, risk assessments, etc. So what is it and why do we talk of it in separation to a safety management system? The only reason the conversation is a little bit separate at this stage is because it's a new addition to the workplace health and safety legislation. In actual implementation and creation, it will be a part of your workplace health and safety management system. And 10 years down the line, I'm expecting it'll be just a norm. Anyway, so what do we do? So we identify hazards in psychosocial system. So under the code of practice, there are 17 hazards that are identified. All 17 may or may not be present in your workplace. You would actually look at the list and identify them with respect to your work situation. And then basically explore the controls with all the hazards that are present and establish the reporting lines. So once you have a hazard, you have the control, you need a control owner, usually a leader or a manager in a work site. And then you create your risk register. So for example, if you have a shift fatigue hazard, you control it by ensuring that there are only certain hours that a person may work during the week, and you implement rest requirements, which would have worked fine for Sarah. Maybe she was doing too long shifts and did not have enough time to rest, which is why she started making the mistakes. Maybe the incident wouldn't have happened if she would have had rest. Customer abuse, for example. Now you have escalation policy and then you have a buddy roster. So again, if that one was in place, she would have known exactly what to do, what to expect, and there was a little bit of a training that was required. So low support, if that's a risk in your workplace, you have a debrief protocol, you have check-ins, and that is an activity that the managers would do. Um, Role overload, for example, is define the task and the boundaries within the PDs. And I do this work all the time with human resource managers because a lot of the times the PDs, when people are hired, are very vague and very um, non-descriptive of tasks. So tightening up the PD is a good way to get people into the organizations, get people set up in a way that is success not only for the people but for the organization as well. Okay, and that's all. Have you got any questions, Felix? How much time have I done? Okay, I've
Um,
actually gone early today.
yeah, you've done
Yeah,
great. 120
yeah,
minute mark, which is exactly where we're aiming.
yeah,
Um, I got a question for you here. So
yeah,
based off that story that you gave me, so that's a story of an individual,
yep,
and a lot of the psychosocial risk system looks at it from a system space.
yes, yes,
So from that individual and then from the interview which came out of it,
yeah.
would you say that that almost story would be enough for that person to then almost put their report through going, look, this company are not providing me or are not abiding by the work health safety laws? Or would you go, look, that was an individual case. We would have to see a lot more cases for that really to be a case to be put
So,
through. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, Felix. I,
Mhm.
I I kind of understand what you're saying. So the reason I've used, look, this story is a made up story. It's not anything that happened. It's because I've worked in hospitality and I see how things play out. But the story is basically showcasing the absence of a system. So if the system was in place, there would be onboarding. If the system was in place, there would be a PD. If the system was in place, there would be a risk assessment. If the system was in place, there would be training of how to do a risk assessment. There would be escalation training, de-escalation training, all of these things. So what is specific to hospitality would be a little bit different to, for example, if you were working in emergency services or if you're working for the police, where there is a higher psychosocial risk, where there is a pretty extensive de-escalation and escalation training provided. But these components make all the aspects of the psychosocial safety system. So from Sarah's point of view, the system didn't exist. And she was in her right to go to the regulator or work cover and say, look, I have been injured at work, and this injury is because this organization does not comply with the legislation in providing me psychosocial safety or psychological safety. So, and it just so happened that she was injured, but the system is absent for all of the workers there. Um, and that's where businesses get caught. They think that because there are, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, they think that we are so small that we don't need a system. And there's this whole lot of confusion in the market. Like when you say you need a system, they think that they need a dashboard and they need to track trends and they need to manage LTIs like, big mining companies. That's really not required. That's, for a small business, you can count injuries on your finger. In the past 6 months, how many injuries have you had? One, and that's fine. But the system is demonstrated by the existence of the appropriate policies, governance, and then procedures. And from them being in place, you have a risk register, which then trickles down into risk assessments. Now, risk assessment where the meat of the process is, in the sense that the work happens at the risk assessment level. You establish the controls, you establish the control owners, and then it's their job to ensure that the controls are implemented. And in a business, if you have like 10 different departments, the control owners in all the different departments will be different people. And it becomes then their job to report to the appropriate leadership and maintain that reporting to demonstrate that, the safety is being provided. And the reason I tell businesses that this is not extra work, because they'll come back to you and say, oh, well, you want us to do this also now. And that's why I say, you know what? It's a part of your safety management system. They are already reporting on the other risks. if the business was complying with other safety requirements under the workplace health and safety legislation, they would already be doing risk assessment for slip, trips, and falls, for example. They would already be doing risk assessments for, fatigue or, working at heights, depending upon the business, working from home risk assessments. And the only challenging part in this is that every work has a different profile. So for me, which is the unique part of my work, is like when I am asked to come to develop a psychosocial safety management system, I actually tell them, I need to look at your whole of your safety system because I need to know where you fit in. And it is very unique for every business, given their work environment, given their staffing, given their level of maturity. One hospitality organization may be way ahead to another hospitality organization. And then the trainings need to be adjusted to the level of the training of the people in that organization. So does that kind of answer it, Felix?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did I did I just run away with it?
No, no. Well, I think you extended a bit, but I think the whole mention on the need for the system and that systematic, I think was what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
And then I think there's a whole other webinar as well on
yeah,
reasonable action on the side for
yeah,
managers and leaders and the individuals.
yes, yes,
Um, I had a great comment here from one of our attendees who really wanted to highlight that need for the leadership controls, the system space, and the need for education and awareness. So
yeah,
thank you, because it is such a misunderstood area
yeah,
and an area which is going to keep on developing and keep on growing, which I
yeah,
think is something we're trying to help with these webinars.
yeah,
Um, I think we should probably wrap up about now. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good idea.
um, thank you all for attending. If you found this useful, helpful, that's excellent. Actually, I was going to send a poll, but let me just send another one instead. If any of you have any questions, burning questions, feel free to include it in the poll. Otherwise, our next webinar is coming up in 2 weeks' time. We're running these fortnightly, and it will be looking more at that consultation on an individual basis,
Yeah.
um, and looking at interviews, tips, tricks around interviews, and how you can really make the most of an interview. And let's see if I have the link handy.
Yeah.
Here's the link. So if you want to sign up for that one, and then, oh, sorry, that one was the one afterwards, actually. So that's the link for the one in 4 weeks, which looks at the specific hazards which influence individuals,
Yeah.
and how we can look at it through that lens. And then the one, 2 weeks is the one looking at the interviews, the frameworks, and how we can make the most of the consultation. I'll email all of you if you want to sign up to the actual calendar, which already has all the events in them. Otherwise, feel free to just keep signing up. Feel free to email if you have any questions. If you have questions for Neri, I can pass it on. If you have questions for me, feel free to just email me, call me, whatever works. But thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Catch you later.
All right.
Thanks, Felix. Bye.